Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Types of claims. There are broadly two types of claims. First is the independent claim, and second, we have the dependent claims. Now, the dependent claims may also be multiple dependent claims, in which you have reference to more than one claim. So, that's a subset of the dependent claim. So, the dependent claim could also be multiple dependent claims, where you have more than one reference to a claim. Now we will show you more examples, then things will be much clearer. Now let's look at a patent granted for a foldable iPhone. This is a patent that has been granted to Apple. That's the patent number for you. And this is what the phone is about. It's a flexible iPhone. Now if we analyze the claims, you can see the independent claims beginning with a preamble and a transition, the preamble being an electronic device and the transition being comprising. And then you have the body, a housing structure, a flexible support structure mounted to the housing structure. Now notice something that's happening here, which we have covered. The first time you mention a housing structure, you are mentioning something for the first time. You are introducing that into the claim language for the first time. So you use the indefinite article a. In the second clause, when housing structure is mentioned again, you change it to a definite article, the housing structure. Now this is what we call antecedent basis. Because you have already mentioned housing structure, you can call it the housing structure or said housing structure. It's another thing, other way to look at it. Or you can even say such housing structure. So antecedent basis is to ensure that wherever you mention an element, you ensure that that element has seen an earlier reference. And the first time you mention an element, it has to be indefinite. So this is a style that is followed. The first time you mention an element, in this case, the first clause, you will see the housing structure. The housing structure is an element which has been mentioned, and that will be mentioned using an indefinite article a. The second place where you mention it, you will be using the. Now you can see that. Now and notice how the punctuation operates. You have the semicolon followed by and. A flexible display mounted to the flexible support structure. So you have already introduced a flexible support structure in this clause. Here you can use the flexible support structure because it's already introduced. Because you are introducing a flexible display for the first time, you use a. Whereas this flexible support structure, it's already been introduced in the earlier clause, you can now call it the. So in patent drafting, especially when you are drafting the claims, the first time you introduce an element, you use an indefinite article a or an, and every other time you refer it, you call it the, said, such, or whatever appropriate language that you can use. Now, again, there is another transition. Now, we saw the first transition that was comprising. Now, comprising these three things, wherein, which means it's a further detail to what has already been described. Wherein, whenever you use wherein, you would usually explain things that have already preceded. So, wherein the flexible display, notice that it's the flexible display because flexible display has already been introduced, has first and second portions, wherein the flexible display is movable between planar position, in which we have abbreviated that sentence, wherein the flexible support structure is configured to hold the flexible display. So now you will get a gist of how the claim is written by analyzing this independent claim. So an electronic device is what we call the preamble, comprising is the transition, and following the transition you have the body. The body comprises of three parts: a housing structure, a flexible support structure, and a flexible display. Now, what is the flexible support structure? What is the display about? All those things can be fleshed out, the details can be fleshed out by using the wherein language. Wherein can be in different clauses. Wherein the flexible display, you can explain, has two portions. Wherein the flexible display is movable, that can be a separate clause. Wherein the flexible support structure, you can explain it. If you want to, you can even say wherein the housing structure, if you want to explain the housing structure. So this is what we call an independent claim. An independent claim has to be the first claim of your claims when you draft it, because an independent claim can stand on its own. An independent claim does not have any cross-reference to another claim. So though we have abbreviated this, we have not shown certain clauses here, you can understand that this claim stands on its own. So what the function of an independent claim is to have a broad, very broad claim, and the independent claim which figures first is usually the broadest claim over the invention. All limitations would normally be introduced into, or variants or improvements would be introduced in dependent claim. Now we will see that. Now bear this in mind. An electronic device comprising a housing structure, a flexible support structure, and a flexible display, wherein various things are explained, is the independent claim. Wherein the flexible support structure comprises. Now, here you find another level of a transition. So probably the third level of transition. First level of transition was comprising. The second level was wherein, and now wherein the flexible support structure comprises, you're going to say certain things. So you can see the third level of transition coming in. Comprises, you're going to explain the flexible support structure in detail. Now let's look at the corresponding dependent claim for this. The electronic device defined in claim 1. Now that's the preamble, wherein the transition, the flexible support structure comprises a sheet of flexible metal. So what did this independent claim do? This independent claim brought in a limitation of the flexible support structure comprises a sheet of flexible material. Now this brings a limitation to the claim. So the independent claim did not have a restriction on what kind of flexible support structure, that it has to be a metal, whereas the dependent claim, because it's based on claim 1, the independent claim can introduce a limitation as to what the flexible support structure should comprise of. It comprises a sheet of flexible material. So now you can see that the dependent claim cannot be read without looking into the independent claim, because it cross-refers to what you can see here, claim 1. It cross-refers claim 1, and because claim 1 is introduced by cross-reference, you have to read claim 1 to understand the full impact of claim 2. So this is a way in which dependent claims are written. Dependent claims need not recite the entire elements described in the independent claim. It just can import everything by a cross-reference. So now we understand the limitation that claim 2 introduces as a limitation to this element, that is element number 2. The element number 1 is housing structure, 2 is the flexible support structure, and the flexible display is the third element. So the second element now has a limitation that it is a sheet of flexible material. So this is the limitation that is introduced. The third dependent claim reads, the electronic device defined in claim 2, wherein the sheet of flexible metal comprises nitinol. Claim 3 is a dependent claim which is dependent on claim 2 because it has a cross reference to claim 2. You can see that defined in claim 2. And the limitation is on the flexible sheet material which was introduced in claim 2. Now we introduced the flexible sheet material here, and the flexible sheet metal is now added a further limitation that it comprises of nitinol. So this is a dependent claim which incorporates a reference to claim 2. So you can see how the structure flows. So you have an independent claim which describes the broad invention. You have dependent claim, which is claim number 2, which introduces a limitation to the flexible support structure, saying that the flexible support structure comprises a sheet of flexible metal. And the third claim, which is a further limitation on that sheet of flexible metal, which says that the flexible metal shall comprise of nitinol. So you can see this is more like a tapering or a reverse pyramid. You have the broadest claim on top, a dependent claim that is narrower than that underneath, and further another dependent claim at the bottom which is narrower than the earlier dependent claim. So you can see how the limitations are brought in. In claim 1, there is a flexible support structure that is introduced. In claim 2, the flexible support structure is now referred to or confined to a sheet of flexible metal. And in claim 3, the flexible metal comprises nitinol. Now let's analyze the independent claim. We had already seen this independent claim. Let's see what are the features of an independent claim. 1, it stands alone. There is no cross-reference to any other part of the claim. It includes only the limitations contained in it, which means the limitations are with regard to housing structure, a flexible support structure where the flexible display has 2 portions. So wherever you saw the wherein here, the wherein in these clauses, it introduces a limitation. So it only is confined to the limitations that are introduced here. Nowhere does it say that the flexible display should have nitinol in the main claim. So there's no limitation that is there in the dependent claim. So it includes only the limitations contained in it. It is not dependent on any other claim because you don't find in the preamble, you don't find any cross reference to any other claim. And for the same reason, we say that there is no cross reference in a independent claim. So one quick way for you to understand whether a claim is a dependent claim or an independent claim is to look for cross references. Is any other claim cited across? So if it is not there by number, you can presume that it's an independent claim. The dependent claim, as we have seen, adds limitation to some other claims. So there was an earlier claim, it adds a limitation by explaining what the flexible support structure is, by explaining or detailing what the sheet of flexible metal is. It incorporates limitations. It can cut across classes. For instance, you can have an apparatus claim. The dependent claim can be a method. So it can cut across classes. You can have an apparatus claim and you can have a dependent claim based on the apparatus claim, but it is not necessary that an apparatus claim and its dependent should belong to the same class. It can cut across classes and there will be cross references. As you can see here, this cross refers to claim 1 and here it cross refers to claim 2.